Hello and welcome to the Animation Industry Podcast. My name is Terry, and I'm wondering if anyone actually cares about the random facts that I share about myself at the start of these chats. This chat is with my good friend, co-worker, and super duper stop motion animator, Cristal Buemi. I recently worked with Cristal on Ultra City Smith, so I wanted to bring her on this podcast to chat about how she built her stop motion career in Toronto and ended up working at the new Stupid Buddy Studios with me this year, plus her whole experience doing so. Now, besides being an amazing stop motion animator, Cristal is a multidisciplinary artist and educator, as she'll get into in this chat. And fun facts about Cristal, she originally moved from Puerto Rico to Canada when she was 8, and currently, like right now in this chat, she's wearing her power shirt, which she explains in our chat, so make sure you tune in for that. Now, before we jump in, this episode is sponsored by Hue, makers of colorful, affordable USB cameras and animation software for creating, teaching, work, and play. Available from HueHD.com and Amazon, the new Hue HD Pro camera features 1080p image and video resolution, a built-in microphone, and LED lights. Hue's funky, flexible, plug-and-play cameras are easy to use, and they're compatible with any apps that recognize USB cameras, including Discord, Dragonframe, OBS, Twitch, Google Meet, Zoom, and many more. In fact, if you go to YouTube and watch my interview with Cristal, I'm actually using a Hue camera as my webcam, so you can see what it's like firsthand there. Now, visit HueHD.com for more information and follow @Hue Cameras on Instagram or Twitter for news, freebies, and giveaways. And make sure you give them some love because they have been super duper supporters of my podcast for a very long time now. Now, without further ado, let's jump into the chat. Hi, Cristal. How are you?
I'm good. Good morning. I'm really excited to be here with you.
Yeah, me too. You're actually the first person that I've worked with professionally in animation that I'm chatting with.
Really?
Yeah, because I haven't really worked that much professionally in animation yet, except for most recently. So let's make this podcast about what you learned about me on the no.
Wow.
No, but honestly, it's like it's so cool to run this podcast for years, since 2018, and I've chatted with everybody in the industry while I've kind of just been on the sidelines and in school and doing my own thing. And now I'm chatting with somebody that I actually worked with. Like, it's come full circle. So maybe I should just stop the podcast now. Like, I've made it.
Over.
Over. This is the last episode.
Yeah, perfect.
But okay, so well, first of all, I guess that we should just say what we worked on together. We worked on Ultra City Smiths together as animators for Stupid Buddy Studio in Toronto, which is really cool.
Yeah, very, very cool.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about you. Tell me, besides being a cool stop motion animator, like where did your journey begin in animation?
Yeah, so my journey in animation actually started when I was studying at Ryerson University. I went for radio and television arts. So my dream before I went to university was to be a red carpet like journalist, like be at like the Grammys and like all this stuff. And so when I first started, like in high school, I actually did like local TV reporting and stuff like that. So when I went to Ryerson, I was hoping that I would be like, like on air. And in my first kind of semester, I took studio, and instantly I was like, ooh, like I don't like kind of being on air. I felt like you didn't really have as much control. Everyone else was kind of telling you what to do. And I was like, really being like a director is maybe more what I wanted to do. So I kind of shifted. And then they kind of make you take all of these other streams so you can explore like, radio and audio and digital media. And my first impression of digital media was like terrifying because we had to learn Flash. And I was like, this is horrible. Who would choose to do this? Like, really didn't like it. And so after my first year, I had a little bit of like an existential crisis because I was like, instead of running away from like graphics and animation and all that stuff, like I feel like that's kind of like the future. Like I don't know if TV and studio is the future. And so I forced myself to take another kind of the intermediate level. And I had this amazing professor, and she was very like experimental in her work and did a lot of like installation work. And she brought a guest speaker from the National Film Board in one of our classes. And so there's this, person from National Film Board, and she's talking about Nolan McLaren and talking about, like animation underneath the camera and using film and all this stuff. And I was like, what is this world? I was like, just so impressed.
You were like, I can control everything.
I can control
You just
everything.
want to
Like
control everything.
totally. And also just like, it could be a small like team. Like I can do this in my little tiny studio apartment. Like compared to kind of like a large studio environment, I was like, this is really interesting. So I kind of started doing, kind of frame by frame experimental animation from that point, like second year university, but I always did it a bit more like a hobby. Like I always still thought like there's money in like TV and graphics. And so that's kind of the route that I ended up doing. But even for like my kind of final film and everything, like I always tried to do as much like stop motion work as I could. Yeah. And then after graduating, I did it more as like, I did kind of random music videos and stuff like that. But then I started kind of going into live TV. So I ended up doing graphics and sports broadcasting. And then I landed my first kind of big gig after university with Bell Media with a news channel called Business News Network, BNN. So it's like 12-hour live news channel about like international business, which I like at that point was like, had no idea about, but the graphics were like very simple. It was like a lot of like bar charts and graphs and kind of, like lines kind of like showing different growths and stuff like that. So it was like a cool gig for like my first, out of university. It was like salary, it was benefits. I was like, hey, like I made it. Like I don't have to worry about work. And I was a one woman kind of department. So I was responsible for like a lot of content, and I was the liaison between creative agency and my channel. So it was like a really great opportunity. But little did I know before I got hired,
here we go.
the graphics department was actually 4 people. And so they decided to, because it was a time where actually TV was like downsizing. It was like when I graduated, it was like one of the worst economic times in the industry. And so they downsized to 1 person. And I was this like young, eager, like animator and graphic artist. And so I like took everything on. But
so
slowly.
They went to from 4 people. They were like, you guys suck. Crystal's good.
You guys suck. She'll figure it out. She's young and eager. She can do it. And I was like, I totally was like, yeah, I can do it. And then I would slowly hear like, oh, it's crazy how much work you do, because there was like 3 other people before. And like, I started hearing all these things. I was like, this is strange. And I remember like one day, it was so dramatic, but like one day at the end of my day, I used to work like 10-hour days. I let go of the mouse and my hand was in so much pain. And I was like, what? Like it was a pain I had never felt before. I thought it would, because it started kind of going up my arm. I was like, am I having like a heart attack? Like it was really bizarre. I had to go to the doctor, like as soon as I left work. And he brought in, like, there was a physiotherapist in the clinic. And so they were kind of working on my arm a bit. And the physiotherapist was like, oh yeah, like you have a repetitive strain injury. And he did this, and you could feel and hear the like crunch of all the like scar tissue buildup. And so I was like, I don't know.
How long were you working at this before this happened?
About like a year and a half, almost 2 years.
Oh my goodness. So you were going hard.
Yeah, like super hard. And I was young, like I was maybe 23. And so I was like, what does this mean? Like my whole career is ahead of me. My whole career is sitting at a computer and making, designing work is ahead of me. Like what? So I wasn't able to go back to work for almost a year because my job was what directly caused the injury. And so I could barely like sit at a computer and hold a mouse. Like it hurt so much. And it was a really, really tough time because the corporation kind of made me feel like I was like making it up, or they didn't take it like very seriously until like, yeah, it was horrible because I was so young. They were like, you'll be fine. Like, but they needed me obviously because I was an entire department. And so it was a big learning experience. And I was actually very lucky that I was part of a union, and the union gave me a lawyer, and I had to deal with insurance, and like, it was a whole experience. So definitely not how you want to start kind of like your career.
Awful. Can I ask how your hand and arm are feeling today? Because it's been like 20 years later. And just 40 years. 40
years later. I mean, I have a bit of chronic pain from it. I think I'm always going to like have pain kind of in
Dang.
my right
Yeah.
arm, but because I kind of went through so much, I learned how to kind of like deal with pain and kind of like how to do stretches but I basically can't really do a job that would only be kind of like sitting at a computer for, 10 hours a day
Yeah,
every day,
totally.
which is,
Um,
I think actually like made me think like, do I even really want to do that? Like, so it really made me kind of like think about, what do I want to do if I'm going to kind of like kill myself for a job? I really think it should be a job that I'm like passionate about, that I feel proud of. Because at the
yeah.
same time, like when you're working in a big corporation like that, like it's not about quality, it's just about quantity. You're just kind of spitting things out constantly. And that really made me think like, is this what I want to do?
Yeah, like everybody watching BNN is not being like, "Ooh, those flash graphics at the bottom with their name rolling in." Like, I want to. That's
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
inspiring to me. Even though there's really cool people behind there killing themselves to like create some nice graphics. Like, I
Absolutely.
like what you just said. Like if you're gonna kill if you're gonna kill yourself at something, you might as well pick something you love. Because like that's also kind of what I reached with my business career, where I was like, I'm doing this every day. Like, what's the
Yeah.
point if I'm not like super proud of it at the end of the day? So,
Exactly.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
so you're off for a year in incredible pain, and you're
Yeah.
having an
Yeah.
existential crisis with what you want to do at 23. How
Yeah.
did stop motion seep into the mix?
Yeah. So right before I kind of stepped into this job right after graduating, I actually did a residency in Spain, where I did this kind of experimental documentary. There was like live action and stop motion. And when I went there, like it was just outside of Barcelona, and I just fell in love with Barcelona. And I fell in love with how I felt when I was there. Like I felt very creative, felt very inspired. And so when I was kind of dealing with this whole experience, I decided like I think stop motion or at least animation is like what makes me feel good, and I don't know what future I have with that, but I think I need to figure it out because every time I was working on something with stop motion, I always was like, how can I make this my career? Like I'm so happy, like like it's just like it was kind of in your body. You feel like it feels right. And so there is this master's program in Barcelona at the Design College of Barcelona, which is an amazing school that does a master's in animation. And so in this year that I'm going through hell, I was like, I need to really like turn it around and do something 100% for me and just kind of like dive into it again. So that's what I did. So kind of when I finally was feeling better, I didn't really need like, to be on disability anymore. I like quit my job and I never went back, which felt amazing. And then I did a year at Sheridan because I felt like I needed had a really big technical background, but I didn't
Yeah.
have a lot of like, fine arts background. So I did a year at Sheridan and then I moved to Spain and I did my master's, and it was the best decision of my life. And yeah, this is where I created a chair there, which is like my first kind of like maybe more professional level film, because my kind of stop motion film in university was not, it was very, let's say, experimental
Okay.
in nature.
Okay, so I was gonna ask you like what made
Yeah.
you, so when you decided, I want to do stop motion with my life because I feel alive and I feel like
Yeah.
proud of my work, and that's amazing. What made you feel that you needed to go back to school to learn more about it versus like
Yeah.
look for a
Like kind of
job
on my
in
own.
stop motion
Yeah.
or kind of doing it on your own?
Yeah, I think it was so. I'm the type of person that like there are some amazing people that like are very structured and are very disciplined, and they say like I'm going to teach myself
Uh-oh.
certain skills, but I am not that person. Like I feel like I need kind of like the school structure. I need like deadlines, and I need like the time. It's just how I am. And so I felt like I was missing just like a little bit more. Like really my stop motion was just like that one or two classes from the workshop, and then everything else was self-taught. So I just felt like I didn't really know how to make puppets. I didn't really know how to move puppets. I didn't really know like the full extent of stop motion. I only kind of knew very basic principles. So yeah, so I did. It was a very, very intense like a year and a half of my life, but it was amazing. And then I moved back, and I was like, okay, like now kind of like what do I do with this? And I actually had my first stop motion job was a toy commercial, and that's where I met Bill.
Wait,
Bill
what, like,
Allison,
so you moved back to Canada and
Canada.
you're
I moved back
just
to
like
Toronto.
sitting in your apartment being like, I feel great. And then a toy company is like, hello, knock,
Hey,
knock.
hi.
Like, how
No,
did that
so
happen? How do you go
so
like,
when I got back, I went through because I felt kind of like I have to justify that I just kind of like took this time off to basically invest in
you
my
spent
career,
all this money living
all
in
this money.
paradise and doing stop
Yeah.
motion? I need to justify this somehow. Okay, so how'd you
Just
do
kind
that?
of- so I came back and I just went nuts with cold emails. Like I just
Mm,
basically like contacted all of my contacts from like, film and TV industry and just said, do you know anyone or any small companies? I was really looking for like small little production studios.
yeah.
And I found one in Toronto called Saved Ground, which is basically a one man like studio. And he mostly did live action and stuff like that, but he also did like a tiny bit of stop motion. And he said he was actually from Niagara, and I was after I moved from Puerto Rico, I was from Niagara, so he had this kind of little connection with me, and he was like, hey, the next time I have a stop motion gig, like I'll definitely reach out. So he did. But because it was kind of like my first kind of like professional one, he wanted me to kind of do it with another animator. And
Hmm.
that's where I met Bill,
What
and who
up?
also
That's
worked with
hilarious.
us.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
he was
City
also working at
Smith.
Ultra City Smith with us.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and he kind of told me about TAIS, the Toronto Image Society, which I know we'll talk about later, but
Yeah.
that was kind of like how I stepped into the stop motion community. Like, I was kind of starting to meet people. I was like finally seeing professionally like what it could feel like and look like. And so it felt like the right decision, definitely.
So, okay, so you just have said it felt like the right decision. How did it feel animating that toy commercial? Like, you're with another animator with this one man
Mhm.
studio on this small project.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe like months from when you came back or like days?
Yeah. I think it was about 6 months after coming
Wow.
back.
So you came
Yeah.
back and you're like super pumped, send out 500 emails, and then you're just sitting
Yeah.
there for 6 months being like, hello, stop motion.
Uh, yeah, yeah. I mean, I actually got a job at like a paper printing company, and I helped with a bit of like design work there. So because I was broke when I got back from Spain, so I needed something, but I was definitely like making sure I didn't get anything that that I could feel I was super committed to, and I could leave. And
So
when I
how,
had
so
to,
how did it
yeah.
feel working, moving, pushing those toys around frame by
Yeah,
frame?
it felt amazing, and it was
Yeah.
really funny because so it was like me, Bill, and the owner of the studio, and then a few other people that were like from more of a live action background, and it was their first stop motion commercial, and they had no idea like how to shoot stop motion animation. And Bill and I instantly kind of connected because it was like we knew kind of entering into this world of stop motion, like we're very niche, like only certain people kind of really understand, and then how to shoot it. Like it's like one thing understanding, oh, I move an object, one photo time, but how to wrap your head around, okay, so how do we go about shooting this? And we kind of told them that we have to shoot in reverse because they wanted kind of the commercial to end with this big reveal. It was like a kind of like a transformer type of car that like opened up and had all these parts. And so they were like, oh, so we'll shoot this one. We're like, no, like we'll place it exactly how you would like it, and then we'll shoot in reverse. And they were like, what? So it felt really cool. Like I had this like secret knowledge. And it was, yeah, I really liked that, definitely.
So you do you think you could have gotten this job and had that secret knowledge without going to school?
I don't think so. I think that master's and even like Ryerson, like kind of my what had kind of what brought me to that point, I
Yeah.
think is what made this kind of producer take a chance on me, because he was like, well, like, he saw kind of the work that came out of my master's and stuff from before, that he was like, okay, that shows it. So maybe if I was someone that was super disciplined, I could have eventually gotten to that skill level. But I think it was a good decision, like for me to invest in that kind of intense year to then kind of,
Nice.
really, really dive into it when I got back.
And okay, so like fast forward a little bit to now, like keeping on the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
thread, like
Hmm.
originally you were like, I want to be on the red carpet wearing super nice dress, taking interviews of celebrities.
Yes,
And
yes.
you're like, that's the be all and end all, ride or die for me. And then
Yeah.
you go to school and school forces you to open up your mind to new things,
Yeah. Yeah,
forced
yeah,
you to
yeah.
take animation. And then you're like, oh wait, I actually like, I love that you thought you were so confident in what you were wanted to do. And then
Yeah,
it
yeah.
totally switched. How do you feel now, like all these years later, going through all these experiences and kind of
Hmm.
sticking with stop motion? Is it still like this is like your ride or die, or is there something kind of missing, or where you want to steer yourself, or you're like shaking your head?
No, shaking my head like, no, this is it. Like I
This
think it
is
was
it.
definitely, this is it. This is the right decision.
You can die tomorrow now. Like,
I mean, I don't want
or live
to.
forever in stop motion, either or, right?
Absolutely. But yeah, no, I think it was absolutely the right decision for me. And yeah, like, so I do still kind of do other work. I still do a lot of like editing and kind of design work. I also have a little background in kind of like art department and production design. So I do some of that stuff with music videos and film work. So I kind of like keeping a little bit of that world still alive. It's nice to kind of enter a world that isn't frame by frame, and work with like different crews and kind of different approach. But most, I would say maybe 75-80% of my work is definitely stop motion.
So
And it
what?
influences like the other stuff. Like I feel like when you're a stop motion animator, you just kind of look at the world very differently, and the possibilities in stop motion are limitless. And so I think that that inspires you to apply to other mediums. So like, I know I have this really great focus on like materials and texture that I has come through like stop motion, and now I apply that to like a lot of my other work.
Hmm.
And so I feel like, you know, even though I'm kind of maybe multidisciplinary in that sense, like I do approach my work still through the eyes of like an animator for
Totally.
sure.
So what is the like internal feeling that you get when you maybe get a new project, or you're working in a project that you just love, that keeps you going? Like, what is that feeling for you? Because like, you know, stop motion is a lot of hard work. It's tough on your body. You know, you left a repetitive strain injury to go into something that is classic for giving repetitive strain injuries. Like,
Yeah,
you know, so
yeah,
what is
yeah.
that feeling that you get that keeps you going?
I think it's definitely excitement. Like one thing I really like about teaching, which I hope we can talk about later, definitely because it's an exciting part of my career now. But I find like even when you're teaching like someone stop motion for the first time, and they animate a little, you know, figure, and then they play it back, it's this like wonderment of like, what? Like I just brought this, you know, lifeless object to life. It still gets me. Like it's still a really exciting process. And I feel like because I'm a bit of a control freak, you have control over each literal frame. So I think that that also really works with how I approach my work anyways.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Interesting.
yeah, it's a big
So like
connection.
control for you. So for instance, like, would you want to be a director, producer, or somebody kind of, I don't want to say higher up, even though it's
Mhm.
classically like higher up on the level, but everybody, you know, everybody
Yeah,
contributes to your project.
yeah,
But when you're like a supervisor or director, you lose control. You have to like give control to other people and kind of steer them, which is a different type of control itself. But do you see
different. Yeah.
yourself staying in like the like,
The
um
kind of like doer, like the
yeah, the
one that
doer,
actually.
like, because
Yeah, yeah. I honestly, I'm hoping not. Like, I do think eventually I would like to do more of like, you know, direction of animation or supervision of it. Because like you said, I think it's just a shift in control. So I think it's right now it's good to kind of be the person that does it so I can learn everything about it.
yeah,
And then I can start to kind of really see like what works, what doesn't, and then being able to kind of control a team in the future that could then produce that work.
step one,
So yeah, I think
control
I would
lifeless
be.
objects. Step two, control human beings.
Taking over the
Okay,
world
okay. Well,
slowly.
you mentioned you do kind of other multimedia projects. Are there like specific projects that we can, you know, we can look out for that we're like, oh, cool. Like, you know, this isn't stop motion, but this is like when you say multimedia, like, are you talking like, I don't know.
What
I
does
mean,
that
I know,
mean?
but I want to ask you.
Yeah, so I've worked on a few pretty big like kind of feature films in the past few years. So I did one where I was working on the art department. I did all the graphics for this kind of dark web conspiracy theory thriller, and it was shot in New Mexico. So that was cool. You can watch that. It's Wander. It has starring Tommy Lee Jones, Heather Graham, Aaron Eckhart. So it's pretty big film. That was kind of my most recent. And then before that, I worked on a kind of smaller Toronto independent film that was actually premiered at TIFF. It's called Below Her Mouth. It's one of the first all-female crews here in Canada that kind of created this film, and that's on Netflix, so you can check that one out as well. And I also do a lot of music videos, so just kind of on my website or on my Instagram, you can check that stuff out as well.
And other than people just knowing you're really cool, how do you get these connections to work on these projects? Because, like, you know, I didn't get any invites to fly down to Mexico to work on a film. Like, how are they finding you? Or are you finding them?
Yeah.
Or what?
Yeah. It's honestly, it's truly about, like, I feel like this is something that's probably said a lot, but it's really about connections. It's really about, like, when you are given the opportunity to work on a project, and you do this perfectly, but it's about meeting everyone and really, like, connecting with as many people as you can, because you just honestly never know. Like, it doesn't matter what their role is on the production that you're currently working on with them, because you just never know. And, like, literally all of my work has just been through, you know, like, one of my best friends, her sister is a pretty big director, and she was the one that directed these two kind of most recent feature films that I worked on. And so she one day on the first one, like, actually someone in the art department, like, dropped out, and she was, like, desperate, and she was like, I know you've never actually done this. This was like right before I did my master's. She was like, but would you be interested? And I was like, totally. And so, like, I jumped right in, and, like, you know, kind of the rest was history, and it was great. And so I think I basically never say no to most opportunities. That's also another thing, especially when you're kind of building your career. It can be exhausting, but it's totally worth it, because now I've kind of reached a sweet spot in my career that I'm not having to send these kind of desperate cold emails, that I feel like there's enough work kind of, like, coming through, which is a wonderful point to finally reach, for sure.
Yeah, I feel like the desperate cold emails is like a classic turn in everybody's kind of story, where you're like, I've decided. I feel like the steps are: decide internally that this is something you want to pursue, and then scramble as much as you can to, like, figure out how to do something for money.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then slowly, you know, you're just, your passion and who you are and making connections naturally just builds up. Because also I get this question from people all the time, and I try to ask it, like, how do you get connections? But I think the answer is just what you just said: just go and work. Like, like on Ultra City Smiths, like, we were instantly connected with every other Toronto and Montreal based animator, and, like, a puppet building department. And now we have tons of friends who all, you know, hopefully will hire me and you.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. Absolutely. And I also feel that it's, especially when you're first starting, like, kind of like a job, like a PA or something like that on a set is a great job, because you end up kind of communicating and helping every department. And so, you know, it's not the most maybe dazzling job, but it's, you know, it's a great kind of opportunity to meet people. And so, you know, it's a matter of just getting in, even if it's not the role that you're kind of, like, hoping for. You start somewhere, you know, like, it's that's how it basically goes, for sure.
And I feel like you also have to make your passion hurt a little bit if you're starting in a role like that. Like, you can't just run coffees and, like, go to the break room. You have to be like, this is what I'm doing on the side. Look at my work, like, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
like,
have your kind of work on your phone, and you're ready to kind of, like, show it. And absolutely, I agree, definitely.
So how did you end up on Ultra City Smiths in the first place? Like, you know?
Yeah. So it's really funny, because I've actually never done puppet animation before. All of my work has been more kind of, like, object based, material based. I do a lot of, like, kind of experimental stuff with, like, sand and stuff like that. So rotoscoping. So it was, like, a totally different shift. But so through Bill, who I'd mentioned before, that I met on my first story commercial, and he told me about TAIS, the Toronto Animated Image Society. And I highly recommend anyone that is Toronto based who wants to get into animation, whether it's stop motion or 2D, or to connect with TAIS. It's such a special community. And honestly, for me, it's been a huge role, a huge key kind of role of my career. Like, it's opened a lot of doors for me. And so Evan DeRucci is the president of TAIS. And so I met him, you know, through over the years working with the organization. And, you know, last October, he sends me this, because we had never actually, we've only worked together on, like, workshops and kind of organizing events. We never actually worked on a production together, and we
Right.
talked about we should.
In background,
And
Evan co-owned a studio, a stop motion studio,
yeah,
stop motion department.
promotion department. Yeah. And so, and his work is always amazing. And, anyone that had worked with him, so I met like Hazel through that. And like anyone that worked with him was like, he's the best mentor, like all these things. I was like, I want to work with him. And so last October, he sends me this hilarious email being like, I don't know if you want to do this. I don't know if you're up for this adventure, but this is kind of the deal. And he's like, so we're kind of running this animation boot camp for animators in the city who either have had a little bit of puppet experience but haven't done it in a while, or like don't have any experience. And it's like a 6-week kind of intensive training program. And at the end of it, the hope is that you'll feel good and you'll want to kind of continue on to work on this show, which we didn't know too many details about. We knew, that it was Stupid Buddies and that they were kind of opening this Toronto-based studio, but we didn't know yet too much about it.
Yeah, and I guess some background is like Toronto hasn't been a big stop motion scene in a long time, and Stupid Buddy was like thinking, they were like, we're gonna come to Toronto and open a studio in 2021, and then they needed animators, right? So
yeah, I mean, they needed everything. They needed every single department, and so it's really interesting, I think, opportunity for Toronto animators or stop motion animators because there's obviously, as you're saying, like there wasn't really a studio here for it. There is some smaller studios that like occasionally do stop motion gigs, but it's like not enough, to kind of live off of that. So it was really exciting, but my first instinct was like, I was terrified because I knew like when I did my master's, we did like about a couple weeks of kind of acting and I was horrible. I did not understand. Like I feel the same like when I went to Sheridan and we had to do like kind of, what's it called when you do like life painting, like still life. Yeah, and they're like, recreate this bowl of fruit. And I was like, what? Like, but like, why? Like, if I'm gonna recreate something, like, shouldn't I put a cool spin on it? Or like I just never understood recreating real life. Like I just, that's not
like,
my
cameras
approach.
like it's like
exactly take a picture. Like I don't understand.
I don't need to learn how to paint this.
Exactly. So I felt very similarly with puppet animation. But Evan is such an incredible mentor and animator and professional himself that I was like, I trust him. And I think it's worth, even if I just do this 6 weeks of kind of intensive animation.
Oh, so you weren't sold. You were like taking this kind of as like, I don't know if I'm gonna like this, but it's a cool opportunity and like, wow.
Yeah. And so I basically felt like as an animator, I couldn't say no, but I also was teaching. I had like really intense teaching schedule. So it was a very difficult time to kind of like organize my schedule. I actually had to leave every day an hour early so I could rush home and teach my evening class. So it was a pretty crazy time. But oh my God, like I learned so much in those 6 weeks because it was the first time since my master's that I basically was dedicating, like 6 to 8 hours a day just animating, and even that time was a gift. That was
so it was like a 9 to 5, 5 days a week for 2 months. That's intense. So like what are you doing? Like what kind of exercises or whatnot?
So we started like day one, we started with like just basics, like just we all had to work with like kind of weird objects like a little circle of tape or like whatever we could find, but it was like kind of just make this move like this. Okay, now we're going to add this element. And it was like slowly building and basically covering like the 12 principles of animation. Like we did that kind of in the first week, and you would all be, so I think there was about six or seven of us, and we were all in our own tiny individual spaces because he was trying to kind of recreate what it would be like on the actual show. So it was very much like Evan was kind of the director. Whenever we would kind of be ready with the exercise, he would come and review it and give feedback. Sometimes you have to repeat it. If not, you go on to the next one. And it was basically that until we grew. We went from like little objects, we did like secondary animation, all of that, working with eases and pacing and timing and all those things. And then we slowly grew to kind of working with like wire puppets. And so we were kind of working with that. And then we did walking cycles for 2 solid weeks of just walking. And then all the puppets were slowly breaking, and Stupid Buddy sent us, I forget what the show was, but they were puppets
Super
from like
Mansion?
a previous, Stupid Buddy show. And so we were working with these puppets, and I was like, if this is what the show's going to be, because these puppets were very tiny and like animating them, like they would break in 3 seconds. And I was like, what is this show gonna be like?
Oh,
Like
no.
the whole time I was very like, is this, I questioned it a lot. And Evan said that actually at the end, because we spoke about it a lot, he said that that was like good. Like he wanted us all to kind of
He
question
wanted to
if
break you. He wanted
basically
like,
because he knew what was coming. And so he was like, you're not going to want to do this job unless you're like, really into it, or like basically, because he was like, it's going to be a lot. And that really, like, everyone else was like, yeah, I'm great. And I'm like, like I was still kind of like unsure about it.
but
But
what
when I
made you
like,
unsure? Like you're doing stop motion, which is your dream. This is like a
yeah,
unique opportunity, specifically in
yeah,
Toronto, which hasn't been around since like Cup of Coffee left in 2008, I think.
yeah,
Like why are you questioning this? Is it because
that's
you
okay.
had so many other opportunities going on, like you were teaching, etc., at the time, that you could like fall back on?
Yeah, I think it was partly that. Like I was like I've worked so hard in this kind of other side of my career. Will this kind of get in the way of that? It was definitely
Uh,
like my first I was ending, and I wasn't very good at the beginning. Like I was not, like everyone else was kind of, I was like the little, like, in the little dunce hat in the corner. Like I was always like the
no.
slowest. Like everyone was like on the third assignment and I was still on the second. Like I was very slow, but Evan was like amazing. And he kept being like, but Crystal, like you have to remember like where you specifically have like come from. Like everyone else had worked with puppets, everyone else had made puppets, built them. So they were very familiar with like how they move. And I was like just even learning how to like tie them down. Like I was like, super, super basic and beginner. So I think it was just a lot of like self-doubt too. Like, can I even do this? Like, how is this going to be? But when I remember the last day of training, we had a little bit, it was my birthday actually, and we had a little bit of like a screening party. I just watched like from day one all the way to like my last kind of dialogue scene that we finished with. And I was like, wow, like even if I see other work and I'm like, that's significantly better than mine, if I look at how much I've improved like individually, it was like, okay, I think I can do this. And Evan was like, remember, like we've done this for like 2 months, but you're gonna go on a production where you're doing the same thing for like months. So like you're only going to keep growing as you go. So I felt really like encouraged by that.
My
And so
gosh, I'm
yeah,
gonna
and
cry.
I was
This is so
like,
sweet. Also, Evan is a gem. Can we just say that?
he's just such a special person. And I feel very lucky to kind of have him in my life. And he basically built this community. Like him and Phil built this studio that is basically now the stop motion community in Toronto. So it's
Yeah,
really
100%.
lucky to
Yeah.
be a
I
part of
randomly,
it.
not, I guess not so random, but they came on the podcast like I think in 2018, because I was like, who are you guys running stop motion by yourselves in
Yeah.
Toronto?
Yeah. If you Google stop motion Toronto and there's like stop motion Toronto, you're like, what? Like, what is this?
I don't know. It's weird, but yeah. Okay. So you went through that course and then you got
Yeah.
hired on Stupid Buddy. And did it go like you said, like working every day and getting better? And like, how did you feel working on Stupid Buddy?
Yeah. Well, I remember, well, first of all, like in lots of productions, there was like mega delays. And so, when we were doing the training program, there was a point where we thought we were going to start, like our last day of the training was November 27th. And we thought we were going to start like the Tuesday afterwards. Like there is a point where like we were going to start right away. And then we didn't end up starting for another almost like 5 months. So that kind of lull before it was really difficult because I had kind of hyped myself up to get into this. And also I had kind of like opened my schedule because I knew I was about to take on this like very intense full-time job. So that was a bit difficult. But then when we finally were brought in for our first kind of orientation and just seeing the sets and seeing the puppets and the the detail and I was so impressed, and I was instantly like so excited to be a part of it.
Yeah.
But it was definitely, it was a roller coaster ride. I think
Yeah.
specifically for me, maybe more than other people, but it was, I mean, overall, I'm so thrilled to have worked on it, to have met, you know, amazing people like yourself. And I'm excited and hoping that I can be a part of season 2. But I think it was because I went in so maybe like 5% doubting if I wanted to be a puppet animator. It was still a very big, like every day I took it as a learning experience.
Mm.
You know, I kind of checked in with myself, is this what you want to do? Because it was hard. It's, you know, and it's intimidating because you kind of go as an animator, like, and I didn't have this experience before because in all of my previous projects, I've worked with other animators on set. But this was like, you know, there's like that Beyonce song, like the countdown, like 4, 3, 2, 1. Like there's like departments that have like tons of people, like lighting and camera, and then kind of art department's a little bit smaller, and then, you know, and then like the DP comes in, and then it's you, and it's
Yeah.
just you kind of bring this, you know, scene to life. And for someone that's never done that before, like it was definitely very scary
Yeah,
and very
you're alone in
intimidating.
like a dark room wearing all black,
All
and like
black. All you hear is like the sound, like when Dragonframe takes the photo, that's like all you hear,
that's
like around
yeah.
you. And you're like, are there people here? Like it's a really bizarre kind of transition into the world of it. But in the end, like I think you would like ask me like what are things that I learned? So definitely in terms of like animation skills, I would say I learned like everything, but I think the biggest thing was like subtlety. So like the style of Ultra City Smiths was like very cinematic, very real, like, you know, kind of as realistic as possible, and very, very subtle. And I, you know, when you're studying animation, you kind of study like one of the principles is literally exaggeration. Like it's like kind of, you know, bigger than life and like a bit dorky and quirky. And so like that's kind of what I applied to it. And instantly, like the director was like, no, 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 no. Whatever you think is going to be subtle, like do it even more subtle than that. And so like that was a huge
Your whole thing is like, I don't want to copy real life, and it's
yeah.
like, oh wait, okay, but make it even less real life
Make
because it's
it
like
basically
subtler.
don't move the puppet, and you're just like what. So that was definitely like the biggest thing that I learned throughout, like just
Yeah.
this sense of like, oh, like control and like honing in the action,
Yeah,
and just like
you have to
acting.
give up that, because like you said before, like you love controlling all these aspects, and then suddenly you have to give up that control for the overall, you know, show consistency animation. Like how did you have to come to, was there like a point where you were like, okay, now I feel comfortable doing this, like I don't know if you had to give up control or you reached a level
Mm,
of skill, like was there a day
yeah,
or a
yeah.
time where you're like, this is a changing point for me?
Yeah. Yeah. I think my biggest changing point was I had done my first kind of longer. So it was really funny because I was kind of given, because I was definitely like one of the more junior animator levels. And so I was given a lot of these kind of close ups for it's more of like reacting moments, like, you know, like a blink and a tilt or a head nod or these types of things, where it's really funny because I get that that is like maybe in terms of action, it's the most like the simplest. But when you're dealing with a close up like that, any little thing
Oh, they were so
wrong,
tough.
it's so, yeah. And so I think because I was given most of those scenes, it actually made me a better animator because I had to be so hyper focused and so aware of detail to a level that
Yeah.
like
I
other
like that you
animators
said
that are
these are the
so
harder or the easier scenes, but like for me, they were harder scenes because like,
yeah,
you know, when the puppet's walking, you can do big movement, but when there's like a close up, you push your thumb and the head either doesn't move at all or like
yeah, or move so
cranks.
much. Totally, totally. Or like I was dealing with this one scene with the eye, and there was like a little piece of lint that I didn't see.
Oh
And so
no.
the lint was like moving here, and then I moved here, and I was like, what the hell? Like, but I remember doing my first kind of like 30-second scene. So like one I
Yeah.
had spent like a few days on, and the director came in and he was like, it's not it. Like you're gonna have to like do it again. And I remember where I was like proud of it. Like I thought it was like a good shot. And I remember afterwards being like, well, this is not my show. Like it's not. I'm not the director. this is not my style of show. You know, like I wasn't here for the conceiving, from like the writing to the pre-production to all this stuff. I'm here to just kind of act through these puppets. And so that moment of like
Hmm.
letting go, because you really have to learn to like let go of the hours that you put into a scene, because very likely you will have to repeat it or go back and you know, fix the ending or whatever it is. And so letting go of that, you know, sense of productivity or control was a huge shift for me in terms of like my attitude towards it, definitely. And then that
Totally.
helped. I was like, well, I'm getting paid to do it, and so if I have to do it 6 times, that like that's what it is, right?
I like what you're saying, because it's also, I was just thinking like that is an experience that you would, or I would, because I had to go through something similar. I would never go through on my own. I would just be like,
No.
this is what I want to do. Why would I redo it in a completely different style that I didn't even want? Like, but being on a production, you're forced to do that
Yeah,
if you want
yeah,
to keep your job. I mean, you could have been like, no, screw you,
yeah.
goodbye. Like, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. But like, you're forced to go
Totally,
through
yeah,
this, and it's
yeah,
actually like this forced learning experience that you don't know, you don't know what you don't know until you're forced to go through it, and you wouldn't have that experience if you what am I trying to say? It's like you become a better animator and like person, I guess, by
yeah, yeah.
going through these experiences that are kind of grueling and you wouldn't go through otherwise. I don't know if that makes
Absolutely.
sense.
No, totally. I think that that totally makes sense. Like it was a little bit of like a life lesson, because I was like, there is so much in life that you can't control. And as I said before, like I am a control freak. And so I do have a lot of like anxiety when I lose control.
Yeah.
And so this show like definitely taught me like,
Huh.
there is so much you can control, and like just worrying about it is not like, that doesn't help you or get you anywhere. So that was a huge huge thing that from that kind of moment I was able to kind of like let go of it a bit,
Yeah.
and it helped a lot, definitely, for the rest of the production.
So tell me something else, maybe like animation skill or non-animation skill that was a big learning experience for you. If you had it, like, this is like
Yeah,
the first puppet
absolutely.
animation, like first kind of studio job. Me too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in terms of like animation skills, I would say I learned everything basically new, like you know, and it's really funny because I was a bit terrified of these kind of close-up shots because everything could go wrong, and it's and then I ended up really liking them, and the director actually told me that he was like, I think you're more of like an actor than like an action, like doing a
Ooh.
whole, you know, 7 characters and like all this stuff. Like I would look at those scenes and I was like, oh my God, like I can't, like that's too much. But I ended up loving the ones that was like these intimate close-up shots of a puppet kind of
Should we
acting.
get closer to the camera here to like get more intimate and
The like nods and the head tilts and the,
yeah,
yeah,
start tilting our heads.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so that
Do you
was
think,
huge.
but okay, so like one of the thoughts that I had right now is like you became that because you accepted it and had fun with it. Like, whereas if you
Yeah,
were only on action shots, maybe the director would have been like, I think action shots are your thing, because you would have had your
yeah.
own. So like, do you think it's you specifically love close-ups, or it's just, you had so much time working on them that they became your thing?
So I was lucky, like the director had very interesting approaches to direction. But one thing I did really like about him was I did for the most part feel like he gave me gradually challenging shots.
Hmm.
And through that process, I could see like at the beginning he did give me like, you know, an acting shot, and then he kind of gave me like a random kind of object I had to do, like just hand shot, and then I did like a bit of like a walking shot. So I did like a few different ones, and I myself felt like the acting kind of like stood out. And so I actually kind of liked being like, well, no one likes these shots, and I'm pretty good at them, and so that actually made me feel better at the end of the day. So I think that because I am a control freak, actually, in a way, it helped, because these ones you have to be so like,
Yeah.
ugh. And so I think
Yeah.
that that did help. And another thing that I think this is like a big thing for anyone like getting into animation, or where you're working, because you're working alone. And so like dealing with self-doubt is a huge aspect,
Oh
because
yeah.
like not only are you having to make decisions for your animation, but you also have to do a bit of editing. Like you have to hide frames, you have to think, maybe here I'm going to add more of a hold or a pause. And so like, you know, if you're feeling like insecure about your scene or whatever, like you go through these kind of behind the, you know, curtain, you go through these like existential crises where you're like, is this good? I don't know, I could have approached it differently. Like, And so I think being able to kind of like talk yourself down from those moments of self-doubt will help so much in this
Yeah.
career, whether it be like taking criticism, whether it be that you're kind of the only animator on set and you're expected to figure it out. Like, I feel like there's a lot of these scenarios where I've heard from other animators be like, I was on this commercial shoot and I was the only animator amongst 25 other people, and everyone just like looks at you to figure things out. And so it can be very like nerve-wracking. So kind of feeling confident in your process, and if it doesn't work, being ready to kind of troubleshoot right away, I think is a huge part of it for sure.
I feel like I'm listening to like life advice with Kristen. No, it's great. I like you're talking and I'm like, yeah, I learned all these things too. Like even just, you know, just forcing yourself to move on too, because you're like,
Yeah.
you can get stuck on an action in like a frame and you're like, I don't know, like what's going on. So yeah. So, okay. Where, you know, what are you doing nowadays, or where are you heading next? Like, you know, production's wrapped up. We don't know if season 2 is happening, and if you know, you're animating on it, like what's going
Yeah.
on? You became like a
Yeah.
super talented, amazing person over the years. What's up?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm kind of back teaching. I just so starting, it was like a few weeks ago
Where are you
through
teaching?
so I'm teaching online
Yeah.
right now because of our current situation in the world. So I'm teaching. It's called the Animation Project, and
Oh.
it's with animators or participants, artists that are 55 plus. So kind of focusing on our elders, and it's a
So
12-week program.
so they're starting animation for the first time?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
nice. Wow. So
yeah.
curious, like what compels somebody at 55 plus to be like, I want to start animation now?
Yeah, I mean, so I find that so curious because, you know, as you get older, it gets harder to kind of learn new skills. And so a lot of them, I mean, definitely how we started the program last year when COVID like really hit, our biggest thing was just to kind of engage this age group because they were the most isolated. And so like just even creating a virtual community for them to like every week connect with. So that was kind of the
Yeah.
main goal. But now kind of doing the second iteration, like we have these artists who a lot of them have some form of art background, whether they can draw or paint or sculpt. There's a few kind of like video creators. All of them just think that stop motion is so cool, and they think that it's like an interesting medium that they want to tell stories through. And I think that
Hmm.
that is so beautiful. Like if I can give them those skills that we can now have their voices heard, like it's really, really
Oh
powerful.
my goodness. Oh, that's so cute. So what are you teaching them? Is it like
Yeah,
12
so
principles of animation type of stuff, or like
yeah. So I mean, because kind of the end goal is that they're going to end with their own 1 minute film.
1 minute film?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's
How long is
definitely
this again?
it's 12
12 weeks.
weeks
Yeah.
program.
Wow.
So I'm also teaching like filmmaking kind of as well. Like, so they're also going to be learning like how to, you know, how to do sound for animation and how to edit and kind of put title and credits and that kind of stuff as well. And so, yeah, we kind of started with this year, we kind of added the ABCs of digital literacy. So that was kind of our first class where we talked about like, what are some terms that we're going to use in this kind of digital platform, getting them comfortable with Zoom and kind of emails and Google Drive and all that stuff. And then the second class was like, I made them all bring like popcorn and stuff, and we had a screening, and I showed them like tons of short films that showed like just like the range of frame by frame animation. So
Oh
like they
wow.
saw everything, and their little eyes, like when they were watching it, they're like, what?
Their
That
little
was
eyes.
crazy. They were so excited. It was so beautiful.
I want to
And
join
then
this. This sounds so cute.
yeah, basically this is the class I wish I could have taken like when I was younger.
When you're
Um,
yeah, when you have to be 55, when you're
yeah,
younger,
we
you have
have to
to
wait. We
age.
have
Come
to
on.
wait for it. Yeah. And then we started getting into principles. So I always start kind of with like the notion of timing. I think is like a good place to start. Like, you know, the idea of like if you want an object to move quickly, like how many frames do you do that in, and that kind of stuff. And then this week we're going to get into the rest of kind of the principles of animation. So we're going to do like a bouncing ball and little things like that. And then we get into storyboarding and story development and then, you know, sets, and then kind of how do you animate your characters, and then the rest of the time is really just supporting their animation process. And we have a few guest artists session, and one of them is actually Marty, who is going to be doing a bit of like a sets workshop with them.
Oh, cute.
So yeah, so it's really fun. It makes me feel really good in my heart in a way that like production does not. Like production is so like it's such a grind, and at the end of the day, you're like, what is this job? Like I'm just I'm bringing these weird puppets to life. Whereas like teaching, I find like fulfilling in a very different way. So yeah, so that's what I'm kind of doing that right now. I'm also moving, so I kind of have to figure out my new studio space in my new apartment. And I'm also working, so there's this all-female music festival called Venus Fest, and they partner 5 international musicians with 5 international artists. And so I'm going to be making all the visual or kind of like video work for this performer for the
Wow,
festival.
that's so
So I'm working
cool.
on
Oh my gosh,
that.
you're so busy. What the heck?
I know. And then I'm also working on another one, but I'm hoping this is going to be a slower process, but it's a feature film documentary. They're called Take Action Film, and they do a lot of kind of like historical documentaries or kind of like, political science. And so this one is about the Bikini Atolls, which is in the Marshall Islands. And it's these group of islands that basically the US government took over in the 60s and did a bunch of like nuclear kind of testing.
Yeah.
And so they want, because it's kind of this island life, they want the kind of beginning part where they're talking about the history of the indigenous peoples to be in experimental kind of sand animation. And so they called me up. And so I'm slowly kind of like working on that, which I'm very excited for because it's my first time doing
So you're gonna
kind of
be
just
professionally sand animating. Oh my goodness. I feel like I don't know if you follow like the 24 memes per second
oh
Instagram
yeah,
account, which is always
yeah.
like upholding like sand animation as like the
Yes,
highest form of
yes.
medium possible. That is gonna be you.
It's gonna be me. It's gonna be me. And it
What
was
the
really
heck?
special because I originally, so Lynn, actually, who we also worked with at Ultra
Yeah.
City Smith, they asked her first, but she, after Ultra City Smith, was just feeling like way too burnt out.
Yeah.
And she, there's only so many of us that have worked with sand. So she contacted me and was like, would you be interested? And they sent me a link of what they're looking for. And I was like, oh, I can't do this. Like it was on another level. Like it was very advanced. And so I was just honest because I was like, Lynn is amazing contact. I don't want to misrepresent anyone here. And so I told them, I was like, look, like this is an amazing opportunity, but I just don't think like I can hit this level of animation. And so I said, I'm really sorry. Like, thank you so much for the opportunity. And actually the director looked at my website and saw, so I do a lot of like material exploration with like natural work under this kind of term of wabi sabi. And so they emailed me the next day and were like, actually, like the director saw your work and things that we can like make it work. Like let's figure it
Oh
out. And
wow.
actually wants to include this like texture animation as well. So now it's a bit more catered to something I
So
feel like
having a
I
website and a portfolio is valuable.
oh my God, yes, 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 definitely. I hate website design. Like I am not a web designer, but it's always worth, every year I kind of take a couple of weeks to like update my website and my portfolio because you just never know. Like,
Yeah.
and it's so good when someone's like, oh, can I just see your work? You're like, yeah, yeah. And like quickly you can just call up, all your work on one screen,
See, I
even like
treat
if
my
you're
Instagram like that. Like I only post things
yeah,
like for my portfolio. So
on
like
your
because I just
Instagram.
don't my
Yeah.
website is like really shit, even with
Yeah.
like I don't have any of my work there. Like it just exists.
It's
Okay,
a
that's
pain. It's a
interesting.
pain to update. So I think as long as you have one platform that you can be
Yeah.
like, here's my
Okay.
presence. Because I also think that some jobs like look to see like if they Google you, like what comes up, like what is your presence, what is your kind of presence in the animation industry. So I think like kind of picking a platform and updating that is really, really important to
Totally
have for sure.
interesting. Well, this is
Yeah.
really exciting. You're going to be working on this like cool multimedia sand
Yeah.
project. That's like so rare. I love it. It's like
I know.
it's
I
like normally
know.
if you want to do that stuff, you got to do it on your own or find funding versus like somebody being like, "Hey, we got some sand and we got some money and
We want
I'm
you to
like
play with it. Like basically, I just had a meeting with the director and I told him like my approach to sand especially is very
my approach
experimental.
to sand."
It's like I don't know how else one approaches sand, but for me it's very experimental. And he was like, great, like let's take the next 3 or 4 months because the production is a bit delayed because of COVID. So he was like, we have room to experiment. So they basically are going to pay me to just experiment with ideas. And I was like, what? Like,
Oh my
so when you reach
goodness.
that, I think like one, like maybe advice for someone like starting, like I
Yeah.
always thought that it would be really important to kind of be like a Jack or Jill of all trades. That you're like, I can edit, I can do everything. But as I kind of like grow in my career and in my brand and everything, like I actually think it's really good to know like what is like special about like your work. Like what do you bring to the table? What is like your approach is going to separate you from someone else? Because like at this point, like a lot of people know how to like use Photoshop or
Yeah,
Premiere, or,
everybody.
like, and so like that's not as like unique anymore. If anything, it's like assumed actually that you like already know all those skills as well. And so I think for me, like tapping into this like natural material exploration that happened a few years ago, like naturally in my creative process, has now opened this door of like, well, like I actually don't think a lot of people do what I do. And so
Agreed.
that's been like kind of shifting or embracing this has been amazing part in my career now for sure.
100%. I love that. I love that you just said that. Like that makes total sense, and I love that you bring sand to the table. And no, but like for instance, like say hypothetically, I have a project right now, and I need a very specific type of animator. Like I
Yeah.
need somebody who works with clay. Like instantly, I have people come to mind because of what I've seen on social media. Not being like Crystal, do you have experience in claymation? Which I don't think you
Yeah.
do that much, but
Yeah.
like
No,
other
not
people come to mind. But
really.
like if I
Yeah.
was like animating objects, instantly I'd be like, oh, Crystal. I wouldn't think of like
Yeah.
somebody else. Like, so
Yeah.
it totally makes sense when you have a project and you need people, just having this like mental library of who does what, or even just searching for people and be like, oh, this, for instance, like Tina Navraki, who I had on this podcast like ages ago, was just publishing her hand-drawn
Mm,
animation to her blog, and then Cuphead was like trying to find hand-drawn animators, which
yeah.
nobody was doing at the time because everything was digital, and they just randomly found her and were like, hi, can we like ship you a printer and a scanner and you like do this for us? And so like,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
putting your unique thing out there is totally valuable.
For
So
sure.
yeah.
But I think it takes a while to, I mean, some people are lucky and they know right away like what that skill might be. But for me, like, because I kind of had in my hands in so many different, outlets, I think it's like it took a little bit to really realize like what was my approach that was going to be unique. And that's okay. Like I think that's part of the
Listen, people
process.
who know what they want to do right away don't have a lot of fun in life. Like you
No.
need to like go around, have existential crises, like go to Spain. Like
Absolutely.
that sounds,
Absolutely.
I would much rather have that story than be like, I was 5 years old, realized I wanted to do sand animation, became a master sand animator when I was 10.
Yeah.
And since
Yeah.
then I've been the
That's
sand
all I've been
guy.
doing. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
I agree. I
maybe
agree.
that's fun too.
I'm sure that there's pros to that as well. But I agree. Like, I think I would not appreciate where I am today if it wasn't
Yeah,
for all of the crises and
totally.
all of the experiences that I had. So I think that that's, I wouldn't be where I am. I think if I didn't kind of suffer, if I didn't go through all these shifts and changes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's so much suffering. What the heck?
There's so much.
Yeah. I'm just thinking as like we're wrapping up now, like you've shared your journey, like all these places that you've worked with and organizations that are amazing to work with, and things you've learned and where you're heading next. Is there anything else you wanted to share for somebody listening who's like either interested in like your journey or what you've learned or just what
Yeah.
you're having for breakfast or something?
I think so. I was telling you at the beginning of the podcast before we started that like I have this power shirt that I'm
Yeah.
wearing,
Oh,
which is
I was going to ask you about why this is.
my tire shirt. And I have my
If you're
braids.
listening
So
to
like
this on like Spotify or something, you have to go to YouTube to check
you
out
have
her
to,
power shirt. It's
to
pretty
wear.
cool.
Yeah, I have this very ridiculous bright orange shirt with a giant tiger on it. I think like finding the little routines and the little, whether it's community, whether it's a t-shirt, whatever it is that kind of like gives you that confidence, because it's not always going to be easy. And it's definitely like a career that is not for like the faint of heart. I say like you have to have, not only do you have to have patience when you're actually in there animating, but it's tough. It's tough to kind of be a professional artist in a sense. And so I think finding these little routines or little, quirks or things that can kind of get you through that is huge. And I think also like for me, like when I teach, I always try and like teach things outside the box. So like, yeah, like when people think of stop motion, they think of like Wallace and Gromit, and they think about all these kind of more typical forms of animation. And I've always thought like, yes, there's that, and that's amazing, and I respect it, and I think it's incredible that we can use those materials. But what else can we do, and what else can we bring to life? And I feel like that approach has opened these doors for me. So I think like for those that are maybe frustrated or maybe like figuring out what their kind of niche is, like be open to
like no
maybe
rules.
Exactly. Like if the medium is limitless, then your approach to it should be as well.
Totally. I love that. Can I just ask you why you're wearing your power shirt right now?
Because I'm exhausted and I could barely wake up today. So I put it on. I was like, I just like need a little power to get through this day. I've been like moving. So I'm like, my body's tired. Like, so yes, it wasn't because I didn't feel like I could get through the podcast, but more like to get through my life in general.
No, I just love this. Like, I don't think I have anything where I'm like, I'm going to do this tiny routine just to remember this is who I am and that I'm great or whatever. Like, I love that. I'm already thinking like maybe there's like
a power shirt
or like a set of earrings or like I don't know, just something that I put on where I'm like, this is just a reminder that I'm like,
this is who I am, and I can do this. I had one of my first mentors. I worked at MTV as an intern, like was one of my first jobs. And he was this like German man. He was super, super tall. He was like 6'5" or something. And he always wore tiny scarves, like the tiniest scarves. And I was like, what is this? And he said that it's like it's like, I don't know. It's just like these things that you like do in your day to day that become a part of you. And I don't know if it's like a security blanket, but it's definitely like, it's like this thing that like helps you kind of give you a little oomph when you need it. So,
oh my gosh, yeah. I love that.
Maybe you have tiny scarves you can wear.
I'll think of something. I like this idea. I'm gonna think about this. I'm sure there's stuff I even do without even realizing it
for sure. Yeah.
Cute. Well, is there anything else you wanted to share as we're wrapping up, Crystal?
No, I think that's all.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much for coming on the chat. It was a pleasure to hear everything that I haven't heard before, which was nice. You know, like we're friends, but I don't grill you on like, what did you learn in animation? Like when we were having lunch.
No, definitely. I really appreciate you having me, and I appreciate you just having this podcast. Like I feel like when I was starting out, if there was something like this type of resource or just feeling like there's a community of other people that are going through similar things, like it helps a lot. So yeah,
thank you. I mean, that's a big part of why it keeps me going. Like, so thank you so much. Yeah, well,
in a way, this is your power shirt.
Oh, my podcast is my power shirt.
Yeah.
Like, what is your power shirt, listener? Okay, well, thank you so much. And if you're listening and you want to reach out or contact Crystal, you can do so by checking out her website and her demo reel, which is on her website, and maybe hire her for some sand animation, which is, I hope I say your last name right, cristalbuemi.com, buemi.com, or check her out on Instagram, which is crystalclear_, and I'll include both those links in the description of this chat. And thank you so much for listening. That is all for now. Okay, bye. The music for this podcast was composed by Will Farmer and the graphics by Daniel Abensauer. I encourage you to look them up if you enjoyed their work.